Hello and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm your host, Regina Price, and I'm here with Dr. Nancy Welch, who's the Acting Director for the Western Tidewater Health District. Thank you again, as always, for joining us on Healthy Living.
Always good to be here. Thank you.
All right, and we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of people probably don't feel comfortable with, or they feel, as we were discussing earlier, they might feel a little alone in things that they might be experiencing, and that is basically around emotional health and dealing with mental illness, possible abuse and abandonment and things of that nature, and needing help and assistance with these type of emotional things that they have to deal with, some on a daily basis.
Oh, yeah.
And we're kind of prefacing this around a book that you wrote, Healing Emotional Wounds. We have it here. And Dr. Welch, we would just love to get your take on, you know, having that emotional crisis, as you will, and
Right.
and you know, what people need to know as far as that they don't need to be alone, and how they can, you know, get onto that road to recovery.
Let me preface my comments by saying that this is our story. I adopted 2 children from Ukraine. They were 6 when I adopted them, and they came with a lot of problems. My daughter had been a street child. They'd been abused and abandoned, so they came with a lot of problems. I am not a psychiatrist or a therapist, and I write this book not as an expert. I consider myself more a survivor than an expert. But I have found, having written this book, that there are many, many people out there who have similar challenging situations. Adults, children, adopted, birthed. And what is occurring is that these individuals feel alone, or they feel ashamed, or they feel embarrassed. And so this book, I hope, is an opportunity for people to feel a sense of hope, of recovery, that they're not alone, there's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about, that we also need to be less judgmental, and we need to be more helpful. I can say that if you were to meet my children today and you read the book, you'd say everything in the book is a lie.
Oh,
because
wow.
I'm very candid in the book about the experiences. There have been lots of struggles, including my daughter was in residential care for a while, police calls to the house, emergency admissions, in-home therapy. I even pressed charges against my daughter at one point. So I certainly have been there and identify with it. But more revealing to me is the conversations I've had with people since writing the book.
Okay.
Because what I have learned, even more so than what I thought was there, but I've now sort of had it confirmed, is that so many people are there feeling so distant and not knowing what to do. And unfortunately, because mental illness, both my children do have diagnosis and they're on medicine and they love taking the medicine, and so that's not an issue, but we don't have a blood test that we can draw and sort of measure mental illness. It's not like diabetes or thyroid disease or taking your blood pressure. And so because we don't have something tangible like that, I have learned that many people don't lend as much credibility to it as a medical diagnosis as they would with any of these other medical diseases I've mentioned. And so they attribute the mental health crisis or the emotional crisis, they attribute it to simply 100% under that individual's control. And I'm not saying that the individual doesn't have some input into it. We've been through lots of therapy in this journey. But it is a combination of both medical and therapeutic intervention. Our science is just behind right now. There's no doubt in my mind that somewhere down the road we're going to be able to have lab tests like with thyroid disease and other diseases where we can measure it. And then we'll know the right medicine. We know the right kind of intervention in addition to therapy that will help. But because we don't, I've experienced even myself, and I was a pediatrician before I was a health director, so I'm not completely naive about about these situations, but I've experienced people who just automatically assume it's the parent's fault and it's just bad parenting. You're just, and literally have been very outspoken.
Wow. Okay.
doing crisis about me, as opposed to simply helping.
And trying to understand.
Correct. Trying to understand and trying to help. We are at, our family, the 2 children and I, at a better position, a much stronger position, because we had lots of help along the way. There's no way I did it by myself, by any means, but I'm amazed at how many families are trying to do it by themselves because they feel they'll be judged and they feel embarrassed. If we have time, I want to give a short example, if I can.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The children and I were visiting, and this isn't even in the book, we were going to an ice hockey game at the Scope. And at the Scope, you walk around the outer perimeter until you come to the door, the entrance to where your seats are located. So you're in a crowd of 1,000+ people. Maybe they got bored, I don't know, but they decided to have a meltdown. And they were kicking, screaming, pulling hair, biting, the whole shebang.
Oh, wow.
So I picked them up, one on each hip, went over to the side of the building on the outer perimeter, and I'm sitting on the floor with my legs around one, my arms trying to restrain everybody, and half the people in that crowd are sort of pretending not to look, pretending.
Right.
And the other half are just very blatant and verbal about what I'm doing wrong.
Okay.
And about how they could do better and what I need to do to take care of these ruffian kids.
Okay.
And out of the blue, this young lady comes over to me and she kneels down beside me and she says, "I'm a teacher. Can I help?" There was no judgment. She just offered to help. And she didn't have to be an expert. And she stayed with us for about 15 minutes, just being there, offering comforting words, supportive words. And after about 15 minutes, the children calmed down. I thanked her profusely, and this angel went her way, and I went my way. But it was an easy thing to do. And yet, unfortunately, we're very reluctant to do it. Granted, sometimes you may offer help and someone may reject it, but that's okay. That's their choice. But I can tell you, I sure welcomed it then.
I can imagine that. That's astounding, actually. That I think the thing that got me was how critical people were, not knowing the children's background, not knowing anything about the situation, just what they saw. And in a way, a society has kind of played a part in that of, hands off. It could be liability. It could be, who knows what people think about. But there have been situations, I can say personally, where I've seen, children maybe misbehaving or, having an emotional crisis and wanting to do something, but not knowing. It's as simple as just saying, "Do you need help?"
Right, and just being there. And a lot of times, especially for these children, and again, I don't speak as an expert, but I speak as someone who certainly has been a part of a lot of therapy sessions to bring these children to where they are. A lot of times what we also don't understand, and it was certainly the case with these children who, as I said, were abused and abandoned and had very, very difficult, turbulent beginnings, is that a lot of their meltdown, a lot of their hostility, and they were very volatile and very violent initially, it's not really hostility directed at you. We take it personally. Like, how can you be so angry at me? I'm trying to help you.
Yes.
It was a fear. It wasn't really hostility towards me because they had some emotional issues that we needed to do the trial and error to find the right cocktail medication to help. And they had grown up in a time where violence and strength and power and deception and lying were the ways they survived. And here I am trying to force them to abandon all the things that spelled survival for them, and to take on such vulnerable traits as honesty, compassion,
yeah.
patience. They would have died with those traits on the streets or in other situations. So it was a very fearful thing for them. How could they trust? My daughter had been adopted by an Italian family and brought back because of her violence. She'd been abandoned on the streets. It's a fearful thing. So sometimes we have to put it in that perspective and not take it personally, and appreciate. Another quick example, and actually this was not too long ago because my daughter is much more stable now. She's really a fine young lady. I'm not biased, of course. But there was a particular situation, and I'll be very brief, but the bottom line is that she had car trouble. It was 11:30 at night. She had just worked. She was very tired, overstressed, etc., and she lost it. And I drove to meet her, and we ended up bringing the car to a 7-Eleven parking lot because I thought it was safer than on the side of the road. And the towing was going to be another 90 minutes. Well, that just lost it. That was too much for this young lady at 11:45, at the peak of all of her stress. So she was just, here we are in the 7-Eleven parking lot, and she's kicking the car and screaming and hollering and just beside herself. And certainly a lot is directed at me because I'm there.
Right.
And I truly had to take time walking around the parking lot, reminding myself, she's not angry at me, it's not at me, she's just afraid, she's had too much stress, she's afraid, until I could get this balance
For
in
yourself.
my own self.
Yes.
Right, and put it in perspective. And then sort of like going into the lion's den, in the midst of her screaming and agitation, I just walked up to her and put my arms around her and hugged her. And I said, it'll be all right. It'll be okay. We'll get you home. I'll stay here. You'll be fine. And her whole body just melted. It just melted. But I could have responded to that anger with the same degree of anger, because how could you say all those things to me? I'm helping you.
Right.
But it wasn't really anger, it was fear. It was fear. And once she felt safe and could trust that, she just relaxed and she was fine. And the next day, she apologized because it's embarrassing for her, as it is for most of these people after the fact. It's embarrassing to look back and see what they've done or what they've said. But in the midst of that extreme fear, and most of these meltdowns, there is an underlying fear of some nature. And at the end of it, when they see what they have caused, they're usually embarrassed and ashamed, but we don't necessarily respond to them as someone who now feels embarrassed or ashamed, because the anger kicks in. It's hard. It hurts to have someone projecting all of that towards you.
If someone's interested in buying the book, how can they go about that?
Sure. It's in the bookstores. It's also on Amazon. And audiobooks are also on Amazon, Audible Books, and iTunes. Plus, when I come speak, I'm happy to bring books if people want to purchase books at the speaking engagement. As I said, I've done a lot of book clubs and civic groups, so I can bring books at that time.
I did want to ask, when you said that the kids learned, or they grew up in violence, and they grew up, that's what they learned. We have children that are in environments right here, right where we live, that grow up in hostile environments. And
Correct.
Just how important is it to try to, if you will, reach some of these kids at that impressionable age?
I'm a pediatrician and I'm a mother, totally biased. Every single child has other adults in their life besides their home environment. We don't know what the home situation is with their home environment and what stress or even lack of knowledge of how to raise children may exist in that home environment. But every single child has other people in their life. It could be relatives, could be a teacher, could be someone at church who just takes an interest in the child, could be a neighbor. Every child has other adults in their life. And offering yourself to be available to that child in a calm, supportive, loving way. Non-judgmental. Helping that child to learn to trust, because a lot of the fear is lack of trust. They don't know what's going to happen. Helping them to learn to trust. Helping them to believe in themselves so that they can thrive and reach their potential. We can actually bring these children, save them. But we do have to start early, and we have to not be afraid. Now, yes, there are risks you take. Absolutely. I'm not naive. I've been there. There are risks you take, and there are times where it just doesn't work out. Absolutely true. But as far as I'm concerned, you help one child to reach their potential and thrive. You have paid for your life here on earth.
Wow. Wow. Just for those that might be just joining us, we're talking with Dr. Welch about her book, Healing Emotional Wounds, a story of overcoming the long, hard road to recovery from abuse and abandonment. And I just wanted to ask Dr. Welch, you know, with you being personally tied to the material, you know, what was the process like for you to, you know, basically put yourself out there?
It was hard. I hired a professional editor, and the first draft that I gave to the editor was simply telling about the children and the experiences. And a short time later, he came back and he just put the pages on the table, and he said, I can't finish reading this. He said, I would have sent it back a long time ago. You've got to tell me something about you.
Oh, okay.
So I can see it through your eyes and understand what in your experiences gave you the strength or the wherewithal to hang in there. And that was absolutely the hardest part of the book to write.
It was about yourself.
Because it was about myself. And I have learned to become more sharing about myself along the way, but by basic nature is an introvert. So it was very, very hard to write about myself and to sort of share my vulnerabilities and experiences, because certainly I'm sure some therapists will look at the way I responded to situations and say, oh my goodness, no. But at the time, you do the best you can at the time. And I live with that, and I'm fine with that. But it meant exposing myself, and it was very hard.
Okay. Well, Dr. Welch, we have to conclude this segment, but I would like to give you an opportunity if someone is interested in knowing more about your experience, you know, as far as with the book you wrote and having to deal with emotional crisis and things, and they want to contact you directly, what's a good way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure. I welcome any opportunity to speak to small or large groups. I don't charge for speaking because I'm fulfilled as much as anything else by the responses I receive from individuals, but they can contact me through either here at the office, or the best way is I'm going to give them a private email address, which is nwelch@hotmail.com.
Okay.
And if they contact me through that, then I will definitely respond, and I'm very happy and eager to speak at groups.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
you.
And as always, the Western Tidewater Health District does provide a wealth of information towards our physical health.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Welch can be contacted for that as well. We'd like to say if you are going through emotional crisis or anything like that, you're not alone. Please reach out to someone. And if you're someone that wants to help, just ask, as we talked about today. Just ask it. Do you need help? Well, this has been Regina Price for Healthy Living, and always, here's to your health.